Hello everyone, this is R.S. Miller at theendtimenews.org and today is November 27, 2012. It appears that the U.S. and NATO are prepping to intervene in Syria.
The U.S. and NATO will work together to determine how to respond to Turkey's recent request for Patriot missiles. NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen says Turkey is seeking to deploy the missiles along its southeastern border with Syria. The Secretary General said the missile deployment would only be for defensive purposes. It would not be used to support a no-fly zone or for offensive operations. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said earlier this month the U.S. was talking with Turkey about threats to its security and said the country is faced with a difficult situation as refugees pour in from Syria, which is fighting a civil war. Secretary Rasmussen said it's up to NATO countries that have Patriot missiles, such as U.S. and Germany, to decide if they can provide them to Turkey.
According to a DEPCA file report Tuesday, November 27th, the Middle East military spotlight swung around from Gaza to Syria with the start of U.S. and NATO intervention. A game changer began unfolding with the site survey begun by a joint Turkish-NATO team for the deployment of Patriot air and missile defense systems manned by American military teams. Although billed for defensive purposes, the Patriots will in fact impede Syrian air bombardments over all of northern Syria, including the embattled towns of Aleppo and Homs. Israel may strike at ship allegedly carrying Iranian rockets to Gaza. Israel has reportedly vowed to strike rockets and other weapons being sent to Gaza by Iran. Tel Aviv issued this threat despite a recent ceasefire following 8 days of bitter conflict between Gaza and Israel. Israeli spy satellites spotted a cargo vessel in the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas that was allegedly Gaza-bound and carrying arms, the Sunday Times reported. Regardless of the ceasefire agreement, we will attack and destroy any shipment of arms to Gaza once we have spotted it, an Israeli defense official told the newspaper. The vessel reportedly began its voyage last week just as Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire ending 8 days of violence in Gaza, in which over 150 Palestinians died. The cargo was believed to include Fajar-5 rockets similar to those used by Hamas in the conflict and Shahab-3 ballistic missiles. The ship is set to travel through the Red Sea, Sudan, and Egypt, according to the Sunday Times report. The newspaper also cited Israeli officials speculating that Iran could be moving longer-range ballistic missiles into Sudan, which could be aimed at Israel from the African country. The Sunday Times report comes a day after the Hamas leadership announced that they aren't ready to stop arming themselves despite the recently agreed truce and ceasefire. We have no choice but to continue to bring in weapons by all possible means, senior Hamas leader Mahmoud al-Zahar told reporters, adding that he expected Tehran would increase its military and financial support to Hamas. Earlier on Wednesday, exiled Hamas leader Khalid Mishael thanked Shia-majority Iran for what he described as arms and funding. On Saturday, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad expressed support for Gaza in the bloody conflict, praising what he called Palestinian resistance and perseverance against Israel, which he said must now bow to Palestinian rights. Israeli Prime Minister says Air Force to respond with force if Gaza truce is violated. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Sunday that the Israeli Air Force will respond with force if an Egypt-brokered ceasefire deal with Gaza is violated. We chose when it will begin and controlled how it ended. If the quiet continues, we will respond with quiet. If it is violated, we will respond with force, he said when addressing the pilots who participated in airstrikes last week in Gaza Strip. You'll be able to continue preparing for the next campaign if the truce is maintained. If it is violated, you'll return to strike, he said during a visit to Palmachin, an airbase north of Tel Aviv, which houses helicopter gunships and unmanned drone squadrons that saw intensive action last week. The comments came 4 days after the ceasefire deal ended a week-long confrontation between Israel and the Islamist Hamas movement that controls the Gaza Strip, in which the former struck hundreds of militant targets throughout Gaza and the latter fired upwards of 1,000 rockets into Israel, some of which were aimed at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem for the first time. Hamas weapons stockpiles sustained hard hits and precise strikes, and most of the missiles aimed at central Israel were depleted, in addition to thousands of missiles aimed at the south, he said. Gazans Crossing Fence into IDF Positions. IDF soldiers stationed along the border fence with Gaza say they have received new orders on opening fire, which allow Arabs in Gaza to endanger soldiers and Israeli civilians in nearby communities. Between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., there are hundreds and possibly thousands of people roaming near the fence, including informed Hamas men, a soldier told Channel 2. His identity was disguised to avoid trouble from the IDF. They crossed the fence several times and went into our forces' positions and destroyed IDF property. The forces cannot push them away from the fence because they may not even fire in the air. A female soldier who is stationed near the fence also spoke to the TV channel, with her voice distorted to prevent identification. "Let us say that the communities in the area are not safe now," she said. "If some armed madman decides to cross the fence, he can cross it. It endangers our soldiers because they are exposed along the fence. At any given moment, if they want, they can now fire an anti-tank weapon at them and hit them easily." In a related article, a knife-wielding intruder broke into a woman's home early Monday morning in a community in the Eshkol border region and was fought off by a tenacious mother protecting her 4 children. Later in the day, the mother, Yael, who was only identified by her first name and who was lightly injured in the attack, had her version of the story related to Ynet by her father. The intruder, a Palestinian man who apparently infiltrated Israel from the southern Gaza Strip, broke into Yael's home in Steed Abraham at 4 a.m., armed with a crowbar and a knife. Upon entering the master bedroom where Yael and her 2- and 4-year-old children slept, the man reportedly attempted to attack the woman, but Yael confronted her assailant, and during the ensuing life-and-death struggle, she was stabbed in the face and shoulder. She nonetheless succeeded in repelling the attacker and ushered her children into the house's safe room. Iran set to unveil new missile-launching warship. Iran will unveil a domestically manufactured missile-launching warship in the coming days, the country's Navy chief said. It comes days after Tehran accused the U.S. Navy of conducting illegal and provocative acts in the Persian Gulf. One of the new achievements of the Navy of the Islamic Republic of Iran is the Sinai 7 missile-launching warship, which will be unveiled on Wednesday. Navy Commander Rear Admiral Habibullah Sairi was quoted as saying by Press TV. 2 new Ghadar-class submarines will also become operational by November 27th. Subs of this type are made primarily for shallow-depth performance and can conduct extended coastal missions. The Islamic Republic will hold a major naval drill dubbed Valayat 91 between December 21st of 2012 and January 20th of 2013 in the country's southeastern waters. Last December, Iran conducted naval drills in an area stretching from the east of the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Aden. Sairi also said that the Navy has plans to send a fleet of warships to the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. The Iranian Navy is considered to be the most powerful and efficient in the Persian Gulf, having at its disposal 5 corvettes, 20 missile and 20 torpedo boats, 13 amphibious ships, 28 auxiliary ships, 3 submarines, 22 aircraft, and 15 helicopters. Recently, Iran unveiled its new 5th naval base in the Strait of Hormuz, located near a major oil transit corridor, through which 1/5 of the world's oil passes from the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean. The strait has recently become the focus of tensions, with Iran threatening to block the route in retaliation for international sanctions over its alleged nuclear program. The U.S. has pledged to keep the strategic oil lanes open. Thousands of rockets will hit Israel if it attacks Lebanon, the chief of the powerful movement Hezbollah said on Sunday, reiterating support for Iran and the Palestinian resistance. Hassan Nasrallah, in a speech broadcast on Hezbollah's Al-Manar television and over stadium screens, addressed tens of thousands of supporters who massed in the southern suburbs of Beirut to mark the Shia commemoration of Ashura. The recent conflict in and around the Gaza Strip, which killed 166 Palestinians and 6 Israelis, was a great victory for the resistance, Nasrallah said. Israel was shaken by a handful of Fajar-5 missiles. How would it bear the thousands of rockets that would hit Tel Aviv and beyond if it attacked Lebanon, he challenged. That which protects Gaza, after God, is the will of the resistance, its people, its weapons and its rockets, said the leader of Lebanon's most powerful military force. While Gaza activists are constrained by their geography, he stressed that the battle with us runs through occupied Palestine, from the Lebanese to the Jordanian border to the Red Sea, from Kiryat Shimona to Eilat, Israel's northernmost and southernmost localities. The time when Israel could terrorize us has expired, he said. Israel launched a devastating attack on Lebanon in 2006 after Hezbollah fighters captured 4 soldiers in a cross-border raid. During the ensuing war, Hezbollah fired more than 4,000 rockets into northern Israel. Thousands of Afghans protest Israeli offensive on Gaza. Notice the upside-down cross. Several thousand Afghan students in the country's east demonstrated against Israel's recent attack on Gaza, blocking roads and burning Israeli and U.S. flags. Demonstrators shut down one of the region's main highways to the city of Jalalabad, the capital of eastern Nangarhar province. Protesters also set fire to Israeli and American flags as well as a Christian cross. The protest comes days after a ceasefire was announced between Israel and Hamas. A few days earlier, about 500 Afghans gathered in the same region to protest against the violence in Gaza. The demonstration was organized by members of the provincial council, community organizations, and local elders. A similar protest had been scheduled earlier in Kabul, but was canceled after a suicide bomb attack killed 2 security guards and the 2 attackers. Anti-Israeli protests broke out in several countries during the Israeli assault on Gaza. In Egypt's capital, Cairo, several thousand protesters demonstrated against the attacks, chanting, "We will go to Gaza in our millions, swearing to sacrifice ourselves for you, Palestine." Thousands of Lebanese visited Palestinian refugee camps in northern and southern Lebanon to express outrage over Israel's military campaign. Anti-Israeli protests erupted in over 700 Iranian cities, with crowds chanting, "Death to Israel" and "Death to America." New York, Paris, and Rome also saw protests. U.S. aircraft carrier Strikeforce readies in case of war with Iran. When the aircraft carrier USS John C. Stennis returns to the placid blue waters of the Gulf with her strike force of 70 jets in the next few days, she will be ready for action off the coast of Iran. The flagship $4.5 billion carrier, a 100,000-ton floating city with a crew of 5,000, was dispatched 4 months earlier than planned to bolster the United States Navy's already formidable force in the region, the Fifth Fleet. Its mission is to keep some of the world's busiest shipping lanes open in its most combustible region. At any moment, America's standoff with Iran could escalate into a crisis. Could there be a threat? Asked Rear Admiral Mike Shoemaker, the man who would command any mission to force open the sea lanes. Yes is the answer. It is imaginable. Also yes. Admiral Shoemaker, a wiry man with a Navy buzz cut, runs through the likely threats: anti-ship cruise missiles, midget submarines, speedboats on suicide missions. Iran's conventional air force and navy are clapped out and no match for the U.S. Navy, but they had years of practicing mine laying. If they sunk a tanker, they could shut the strait for a couple of days or a week, Admiral Shoemaker said. But we could deal with that quite quickly. A massive mine-laying effort, though, would take a while to clear. Iranian warships returning to Sudan. Iranian warships will return to Sudan on Friday, the armed forces said, 1 month after a similar port call followed Khartoum's accusation that Israel bombed a military factory. Sudan's links to Iran have come under scrutiny after Khartoum accused Israel of the October 23rd strike against the Yarmouk compound, which led to speculation that Iranian weapons were stored or manufactured at the factory in Khartoum. 2 Iranian warships would also visit Port Sudan Harbor on November 30 and would stay at the harbor for 3 days within the military maritime cooperation, said Swarmi Khalid Saeed, Sudan's army spokesman quoted by the official Suna news agency. A Pakistani naval vessel would also stop at the Red Sea port for 2 days beginning on Thursday, Saeed said. During this visit, 3 ships would get fuel and other logistical materials, he added. Arab men harass and attack Jewish girls. Outside Israel, most of the world only hears about the major eruptions of violence between Jews and Arabs in the region. But there is an unseen and constant low-level campaign of racial hatred, intimidation, and terrorism that plagues the nation. Case in point, a few days ago, 4 Arab men were caught red-handed trying to rape a teenage Jewish girl in the northern Israeli town of Afula. The rape was prevented at the last minute by a Jewish man who heard the girl screaming and scared away her attackers. I was walking in the city center near a darkened building under construction when I heard a girl screaming for help, Itaya Cohen told the Jewish Voice. I went inside and saw 4 Arab men around 30 through 40 years of age holding down a crying Jewish girl. I grabbed a crowbar and shouted. They panicked and ran away. Cohen later said that while he simply acted on instinct in the heat of the moment, had the Arab men decided to turn on him, the incident could have ended far worse for both Cohen and the girl. After returning the traumatized girl to her family, Cohen stated that this was far from an isolated incident. We are surrounded by Arab villages, and Arabs walk freely around Afula, he said, asserting that as a result, harassment has been increasing all over the city, but most Jews are too afraid to speak up. 4 people were killed and 901 homes were damaged by raging floodwaters across Britain. The country's south has been spared the worst of the heavy rains and high winds as the Midlands, west and north brace for the brunt of the storm. Over 500 flood alerts were issued during the last few days for England, Wales, and Scotland. 4 people died over the weekend, and 1 person was declared missing. A 21-year-old woman, reportedly homeless, was killed in Exeter on Saturday when a tree fell on her tent. 2 other men were injured in the incident. In Cambridgeshire, a 70-year-old man was pulled underwater when his car plunged into a swollen river that evening. A bystander dragged him to the shore, but the man was later pronounced dead by paramedics. Rescuers in Somerset managed to save a 12-month-old baby from a car. Rainfall tapered off in the southwestern UK on Sunday, but the Environmental Agency warned that hundreds of areas were still at risk, with river levels high and more rain expected to hit the area. Friends, it is unfortunate that far too many people, even Christians, are misreading the signs of the times. Too many are failing to recognize God's prophetic warnings to his people and indeed the entire world. He tells us that there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, the heavens above and the earth below. It would seem to me that with all the various prophetic events taking place around the world, most people would clearly see them as signs from God, and especially followers of Christ. But much to my dismay, that doesn't appear to be the case. In my opinion, a lot of people find comfort when science community discovers the cause of what might otherwise be considered a biblical event. But just because science finds the answer to a mystery doesn't mean that it's not one of God's prophetic signs. Dismissing what could be a prophetic sign from God based on the ability of science to discover a cause for it makes virtually no sense when considering the fact that God, to my knowledge, seldom mentions exactly how he is going to perform signs and wonders. In other words, he simply states that there will be wars and rumors of wars, which are a natural part of the human condition. Earthquakes, famines, and pestilences, again, a natural phenomena and part of the human condition. He tells us that there will be other signs as well. Signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, the heavens above, and the earth below. If God chooses to crash an asteroid into the earth, and because science is able to explain the existence of asteroids and the probability that one will indeed hit the earth at some point in the future, does that negate the fact that God has foretold of this event long before, or that he has absolutely nothing to do with it? If millions of fish die in the sea, and thousands upon thousands of birds drop from the sky, should we disregard the Hosea prophecy, among others? When the Arab nations mentioned in the Bible begin to say, we should wipe Israel off the face of the earth, should we disregard those prophecies? What about rivers and seas turning to blood? Does it mean that it will be blood literally? Not necessarily. The Bible could be referring to the waters turning red, as in the appearance of blood, and its inability to support life. And although as yet there have been no biblically proportioned apocalyptic-sized events of waters turning red, unless you consider the Azov Sea in Russia as fitting the description, these events must still be taken into consideration and in conjunction with other events that have been taking place. The Bible tells us that the events which will indicate the signs of the end times will come upon the earth as a woman in travail. This is to say that the signs of the end will increase in frequency and intensity in much the same way a woman experiences contractions and pain before giving birth. In essence, we are living in the last days. Storms and earthquakes of historic proportions, wars and rumors of wars, mysterious new diseases, reemergence of highly resistant old diseases, mass starvations from famines, and millions upon millions of dead fish, birds, cows, sheep, deer, and other animals. These are all signs that the end of this world system is near and that Jesus Christ is about to return soon. When volcanoes erupt, most times they give off warning signs, and in the end, it really doesn't matter whether science is able to explain it or not. Similarly, God too has given us warning signs in the form of his prophetic word, and again, it really doesn't matter whether science can explain it. These are the signs which God is using to warn mankind so that that day will not come upon us as a thief in the night. But if we keep dismissing the warnings, then we will be caught off guard. In Matthew 24, Jesus is referring to the signs of the end, and he says, "Now learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branches is yet tender, and it puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So likewise, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors." Are you saved? Follow the link below and pray the prayer of salvation with a sincere heart, and you will be saved. It is my prayer that God blesses each and every one of you with ears to hear, eyes to see, and a heart to receive. In Jesus' name, amen.